Okay, we're going to get started. So please note that this meeting is being recorded. Good afternoon. My name is Brad Tito. I'm the Program Manager for Communities and Local Government at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA. Welcome to a very exciting webinar on opt-out community distributed generation, CDG programs in New York State. So I want to make clear right off the bat that the purpose of this webinar series is not educational or to provide an overview of opt-out CDG and talk about how it works and why it's important. We'll touch on some general information, and you will certainly hear details about how this program may be implemented. But NYSERDA and the Department of Public Service, DPS, are hosting this webinar series to receive specific feedback from stakeholders regarding the development of rules governing the operation, oversight, and enforcement of opt-out CDG programs in New York State. So just keep that in mind. If your expectation was to hear general information, this may not be for you. The content is rather technical and specific to regulatory questions that are currently on the table. But we welcome your feedback so that these programs can become turnkey and so that communities that choose to implement opt-out CDG can do so with the least amount of friction. Next slide. Now, it's been recognized since its inception in 2014 that community choice aggregation, CCA programs, have the potential to integrate innovative energy programs, products, and services in ways that benefit customers and help advance state clean energy goals. Opt-out CDG is a natural offshoot of that aspiration. You know, the idea of opt-out CDG was first floated in January of 2018 in the CCA Policy Recommendations Report, which was prepared by the CCA subgroup of the Clean Energy Advisory Council. And the report called for CCA programs to offer the option of automatically enrolling customers into community solar and other CDG projects en masse, potentially thousands of homes and businesses at a time. Now, some of you who were involved in that process have joined us on the call today, so welcome. Now, in March of 2018, the Public Service Commission first introduced requirements for integrating an opt-out CDG component into CCA programs in the order approving dual assets CCA program with modifications. In April 2021, DPS staff filed a white paper proposing updated rules for CCAs, including provision for CCAs to provide opt-out community solar to all CCA members. And there are really good reasons why opt-out CDG is important. As noted in New York's 10 gigawatt distributed solar roadmap, opt-out community solar offers a new element of efficiency and soft cost reductions to CDG development, since a project owner could avoid substantial customer acquisition costs associated with recruiting many individual participants. It's a scenario where opt-out CDG provides a potentially enormous demand for CDG projects in New York State, while at the same time reducing the costs of solar. And that's an important dynamic as New York seeks to facilitate the construction of 10 gigawatts of solar in the coming years. But there's also acknowledgement that the policy introduced complications that need to be addressed. And that's why in November of 2021, the Commission issued an order identifying further procedural steps regarding the development of opt-out community distributed generation under case 14-M-0224. And in this order, the Commission made clear that it sees merit in advancing an opt-out CDG program and believes that an opt-out CDG program will help spur the development of CDG projects across the state, all while motivating participating communities to make cleaner energy choices that will in turn bring the state closer to reaching its clean energy targets. However, in order to properly safeguard CDG benefits for all New Yorkers, the Commission found that additional time was required to properly develop the appropriate program operation oversight and enforcement rules to ensure a successful opt-out CDG program. So the Commission believes that by identifying the solutions necessary to resolve the issues described in the order, such as, but not limited to, data and billing technical issues, program implementation advantages and disadvantages, and necessary limitations and/or requirements unique to such programs, that the Commission will be able to establish an opt-out CDG program that will benefit all New Yorkers, not just the communities who choose to participate. Accordingly, the Commission has found that additional procedural steps are necessary to address these matters, and they directed staff to file within 120 days of the effective date of the order proposed opt-out CDG program operation, oversight, and enforcement rules with the Secretary for further future Commission consideration. So what this is saying is that the Department of Public Service staff, aka today's participants, the panelists on this webinar, they've been directed to prepare a straw proposal for what these rules should be, and the assignment is due on March 22nd, 2022. So we don't have a lot of time, but it is coming fast. So the purpose of this 2-webinar series is to convene CCA and opt-out CDG stakeholders to inform the development of this filing and explore potential solutions to the issues identified in the order. So Kelly Straight is a utility analyst with the Department of Public Service. She'll walk us through the initial straw proposal piece by piece. We'll also be joined by Michael O'Donnell, also a utility analyst with DPS. Tom Dwyer, Assistant Counsel at DPS, will be joining the Q&A as needed. And we'll also be joined by Max Joel, Assistant Director of New York Sun, who is fair to say helped invent opt-out CDG. He'll be a presenter as well. And before I hand it over to Kelly, let's just go over some housekeeping. Next slide. So the point of today is not to hash out and debate and resolve all the issues. The purpose is to get the issues on the table so that we can continue this engagement over time and arrive at a final straw proposal to file with the Commission, again, by March 22nd, 2022. So we welcome your feedback. But let's go over participation ground rules. Presentations will take place during the first part of this webinar. All microphones are muted for the presentations, followed by a question and comment period. Raise your hand to make an oral comment or question. We'd like you to limit your comments to 2 minutes in order to allow as many people to participate as possible. Moderators will call on you and unmute your mic. Please put your hand down when done. Okay, put your hand down when done. You can ask a question or comment in the Q&A function, and moderators will address them towards the end. For any questions not answered within today's 90 minutes, participants are encouraged to follow up directly with the moderators. There will be a slide with all our contact information. You can always send additional comments to an email address, cca@dps.ny.gov, anytime after today's meeting. That'll be on a slide later today, too. Again, that's cca@dps.ny.gov. Please note that a follow-up webinar is scheduled for February 16th at 2 p.m. We hope you'll join that webinar as well. Again, thank you for joining us today to discuss this important topic. Kelly, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Brad. Hi, everyone. First, I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon to discuss opt-out CDG. I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining how a program like this could fit into CCAs. As Brad said, the work here will focus on the necessary rules for an opt-out CDG program. I'm sorry, Sal, could you go to the next page, the slide? Thank you. The program should follow the foundational requirements established in the CCA framework order. If those requirements change, this program, if adopted by the Commission, will most likely need to comply with those changes. These foundational requirements include the need for a muni to pass a local law, the need for an administrator to file plans describing their program, as well as the need for the development and execution of a strong outreach and education plan specific to the community. The framework order also addresses the need for customer data to be compiled accurately and transferred safely from the utility to an administrator. Today's webinar will address both the foundational requirements of the CCA framework when applied to a program like this, as well as the specific program rules for the development of an opt-out CDG program. These rules are needed to ensure that the program, again, if adopted by the Commission, protects all customers within the state, not just the customers participating in an opt-out CDG. What you see to the right of this slide are some of the topic areas we will be discussing with you today. Next slide, please. We recommend that an opt-out CDG product be permitted to be offered as either a standalone product or a combined product. We think munis should be able to choose to offer just CDG, just supply, or both. We think there are important benefits to a program like this. Brad went over a few in the introduction of this webinar. Communities and their customers will have more choices. This will increase their awareness and understanding about energy, something most people do not think about and really need to. More CDG projects will be financed, developed, and interconnected to the state's distributed grid. This will increase the production of clean energy and help the state meet its climate leadership and Community Protection Act goals. And thanks to Consolidated billing and all the hard work and time that has been dedicated to making it happen, customers can now easily take advantage of the savings CDG offers on their utility bill. Next slide, please. We recommend that APP customers be the first members to be subscribed within the Muni's opt-out CDG program. Ideally, we think all APP customers within the community should be subscribed at the same time. This will ensure fairness across the customer base. With that being said, we recognize there are times when that might not be practical, such as when a community has a large number of APP customers, or when a community is in an area with limited CDG capacity. For that reason, we are open to hearing solutions for how APPs could be prioritized and phased in. We think a community should be allowed to subscribe non-APP residents into their program only after all APP residents in that community have either been subscribed or have opted out. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to pass it over to Max Joel from NYSERDA. And again, thank you all for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is Max Joel at NYSERDA. Thank you very much, Kelly and Brad, for leading the presentation, and thank you to everyone for joining today. We recommend that the credit pooling mechanism outlined in the expanded Solar for All order be utilized for opt-out CCAs. The credit pooling mechanism that was proposed by National Grid and NYSERDA and approved by the Commission for the opt-out expanded Solar for All program potentially offers considerable efficiencies for both the CCA administrators, the customers, and the utilities in implementing an opt-out CDG program at the CCA levels. We acknowledge that this may not be immediately feasible for all utilities, particularly from a IT and billing infrastructure perspective. So our recommendation is that until those changes can potentially be made, a conventional CDG crediting model leveraging net crediting should be used. Next slide, please. Our recommendation here is that a minimum of $5 in monthly savings for APB customers under a pooling mechanism, or a minimum of $60 a year for APP customers under a net crediting methodology be targeted. This amount was chosen for consistency with the expanded Solar for All order, and also to ensure that APP customers at a minimum receive meaningful and noticeable cost savings through their enrollment an opt-out CDG. Next slide, please. Our recommendation for administrator fees is that there be clear and specific standards for what can be charged by administrators, facilitated through a competitive municipal bid process with NYSERDA's assistance. Next slide, please. In terms of limiting opt-out CDG capacity, we are not recommending that capacity be limited at a utility level or at a total program level. Rather, we are recommending that some level of management over total opt-out CDG capacity be incorporated into the New York Sun incentive structure as proposed in the 10 gigawatt roadmap. For those of you who have read the 10 gigawatt roadmap in all its 100 plus pages of detail, this question is raised in the roadmap as a question seeking further stakeholder feedback. Two mechanisms for balancing opt-out CDG versus conventional or opt-in CDG capacity are raised in the 10 gigawatt roadmap. They are one, that the potentially the allocation of New York Sun Community Adder that could go to a opt-out CDG project be limited. So, for example, a separate block of capacity just for opt-out projects, or alternatively, a lower community adder rate available for opt-out CDG projects, reflecting potentially lower costs associated with the opt-out model that may come from customer acquisition or management. Next slide, please. So for expanded solar for all, which in last month's session, the Commission ordered National Grid and NYSERDA to implement in the National Grid electric service territory, we're proposing three possibilities for consideration and exploration here. In the order approving the expanded Solar for All program with modifications, the Commission declined to specify how a customer might be placed in one program or the other, where a CCA and ESFA are available, with the exceptions of the CCAs already operating with opt-out CDG in the National Grid service territory, and instead directed that question to this process. So in the event of, in the National Grid service territory, a CCA that is looking to implement opt-out CDG could have the option of simply keeping their APP customers in the ESFA program. Under this scenario, this option would align with the recommendation that APP customers be served first by essentially potentially covering that recommendation. So if APP customers are already being served by ESFA, those customers would not necessarily need to be served by the CCA's opt-out CDG program. The second option, which NYSERDA and National Grid proposed in their ESFA proposal, is for the CCA to provide a deeper savings alternative to the savings offered by expanded solar for all through the opt-out CDG program. I'll note here that behind this recommendation at this point is some more detail and clarity than was provided in the April 2021 filing, in that we would propose using a adapted version of the NYSERDA VEDR calculator, which is available online, to calculate or to estimate the level of capacity that would need to be allocated or that would be projected to be allocated to a APP customer in order to reach the same estimated or deeper estimated savings than ESFA. This methodology would allow a CCA to file to implement an opt-out CDG program with that information in their plan, and thus be enabled to automatically have its customers transferred from ESFA to the opt-out CDG program once that program came online. So that would allow the CCA to move forward with certainty that their plan met this requirement were to be put into place. The third option that's being explored by DPS and NYSERDA is permitting the CCA opt-out CDG program to target a deeper savings for APB customers by matching the expanded Solar for All contribution. So you could think of this as layering the benefit that a customer would be receiving from expanded Solar for All on top of, or beneath, depending on how you want to think about it, with the benefit that they could receive from opt-out CDG. The value there, of course, would be deeper savings for the low-income customer, which is really the paramount goal. It would also mean that they were participating directly in the CCA. This is presented as an idea or a concept. DPS staff and NYSERDA are still exploring how this concept could be implemented, what challenges may be involved, and perhaps most importantly, is this consistent with prior Public Service Commission orders related to participation in CDG projects. Next slide, please. And at this slide, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Mike O'Donnell at DPS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max, and thank you to every participant on the call now. We appreciate your feedback. Regarding outreach and education, we recommend that opt-out CDG O&E comply with the existing CCA framework requirements, as well as additional requirements for a combined product offering and phased-in CDG. What we mean by phased-in CDG is when members are subscribed to programs periodically, some initially and others 6 to 12 months, etc. We understand that a combined offering for munis who choose to offer both supply and CDG will allow for greater energy options and consumer choices. However, in most instances, these two products are implemented under differing timelines, necessitating additional requirements regarding outreach and education. We need to guarantee that customers who already have a supply product are not confused by another product offering or misguided by the timing of the offerings. We also need to ensure that customers understand the phasing of CDG. For these two reasons, we will recommend requirements specific to combined product offerings and phased-in CDG. Regarding combined offerings, we recommend that administrators only be permitted to conduct a combined supply and CDG O&E period if each of the two products are on customers' bills within 6 months from the end date of the O&E period. If both of the products are not on the customer's bill within these 6 months, the municipality should conduct a full O&E period for each product offering. For supply customers who will, in time, be eligible to receive an opt-out CDG membership, the initial supply opt-out letter should inform that customer that they will be receiving an opt-out CDG letter at a later date. In the case when a municipality is offering CDG and the memberships are being phased in, we recommend each additional phase has at least one publicly held meeting, which should target the customer class of that phase, and the opt-out letter should then be sent to the members of that phase. We also recommend that APP customers receive an opt-out CDG letter that includes additional information on the impact a CDG subscription would have on their status as an APP. In most instances, we expect that this communication would confirm with the customers that participation in a CDG program will not negatively impact their APP status. Next slide, please. When it comes to data access and consolidated billing, we recommend that each utility test and confirm that their IT system can produce the data necessary for the program, including historic usage of all eligible CDG customers. Staff plans to work closely with the utilities to better understand their capabilities to produce this data, as well as to ensure that a data security agreement is in place. For consolidated billing, again, we will work with the utilities on their net crediting processes, including their automation upgrades, and hope to report on their progress at the next webinar. Next slide, please. Finally, with reference to municipal implementation plans, we recommend that authorized administrators be required to file Muni IPs for staff review and verification. The Muni IP should be specific to the opt-out CDG program and include the following information: a copy of the local law, which includes the authorizing of opt-out programs, specifically in this instance, CDG programs, CDG specific information detailing project size, location, utility service territory, and number of participating members for each project. Reporting information specific to APP, prioritizing and phasing and timing of subscription enrollments by service classes, all administrator fees being collected, net crediting rate savings or credit pooling monetary amount for members, an education and outreach package, demographic information including percentages of ESL customers, and a generic opt-out letter. Next slide, please. And with that, I will pass it back over to Brad. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So again, we have the Q&A feature for you to add questions. We also offer you the opportunity to raise your hand and we'll call on you so you can provide comments. Again, if you could limit your comments to 2 minutes, that would give everybody a chance to contribute. So at this point, we will wait for anybody who wants to ask a question or raise their hand. Okay, so we have a question. Because of the unique environment in the LIPA service area on Long Island, we'd like the ability for a municipality to have 2 CCA programs and 2 separate CCA administrators, one for gas and the second CCA program with opt-out CDG for electricity. Thank you for your comment. So a new question is, I'm curious about your choice of a minimum dollar savings versus a minimum % discount. What led you to that recommendation? Is this best answered, say, by Max?
Sure, I can recommend that, or I can explain that recommendation. So first part of the recommendation would be that in the case where net crediting is being used and savings for each customer would be expressed as a percentage of the credits allocated to their bill, the minimum would be the equivalent of $5 a month or $60 a year. So it'd still be expressed as a percentage. In terms of why a uniform amount versus an amount that varies based on customer usage, there is some argument related to that in the expanded solar for all filing. And I think you can also, that builds on some kind of argument and thinking in the energy affordability orders that established the the set of utility programs we kind of generally refer to as APP in these conversations as to why uniform amounts, or at least categories of amounts, are more appropriate than a discount percentage. So without delving into that, there is kind of that background that is goes sort of longer and further than just in regard to community solar, and is more of a match meant to match with low income customer billing and usage patterns. One other consideration specific to CDG, and again, this was this is something that I think we would certainly appreciate your informal feedback on, as noted on this slide, is that with opt-in CDG, a minimum or a percentage discount is usually expressed as the equivalent, that percentage equivalent reduction for the customer's entire bill. So I subscribe to CDG in my house. My contract says targeting 10% of my total bill. But technically, I believe it's a correct reading of the CDG and net crediting orders that a percentage savings could be just simply a percentage of the credits allocated to that customer. So in net crediting, if the customer saving is 10% of their allocation, that allocation may not cover their full usage. It may, its only floor is the 1,000 kWh a year minimum. So a percentage savings requirement seemed to us to be less reliably connected to actual savings, meaningful savings to the customer compared to a dollar target. But again, that is just sort of the thinking on our end, and we'd really welcome comments on those points.
Great, thanks, Max. So comment is, I know NYSERDA and DPS staff are the best in the country, but you are all with a lot on your plates right now. Can you give us an update on the timing of this white paper framework? Are all indications that this will be issued by the March deadline, or should we expect this to take additional time? Maybe I'll turn this over to Kelly to answer.
Thanks, Brad. Yep, you're correct. We do have a lot on our plate right now, but we are committed to this initiative, this collaborative, and we are working to make sure the straw proposal is filed consistent with the Commission's directive in the November 2021 order. And thank you for the compliment.
Great. So the next question is, I believe you said that the opt-out CDG would be available to APP customers first. When do you envision non-APP customers might be able to participate? And I'll turn that over to Kelly.
Thanks, Brad. I mean, I think that's a question that's specific to the community and the demographics of that community. If it's a municipality with a small number of APP customers, or just a small population that's eligible for opt-out CDG in general, there could be an instance when APPs and non-APPs are enrolled together, or you could look at a larger area where the APPs are first served, and it's depending on the procurement of the CDG projects from the administrator. So I think it's a good question, and the answer is specific to the community.
Thank you. Will any CDG rules be waived or updated, namely the 1,000 kilowatt hour minimum allocation per year? Kelly, I'll hand that one over to you as well.
We're definitely open to suggestions as to when the current CDG rules should be waived for an opt-out program like this. I believe, and Max, you might be able to correct me, that the credit pooling mechanism for the expanded solar for all waived the 1,000 kWh minimum. Max.
Yes, I believe that's correct. That was certainly proposed, and I think we would consider the order to have approved that request.
Okay. Anyways, we definitely would like your feedback and suggestions as to not only the 1,000 kWh rule, but there are other rules that should be looked at as we develop this draw proposal.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Next question is for a CDG initially targeting the APP customers. Would a customer coming off of APP because they're no longer qualified be able to remain in the CDG CCA, or would they have to give up their subscription?
Brad, I think I can answer that. Something at least staff and we've discussed internally, and I think we would recommend that that customer stays on the CDG program. That they shouldn't be dropped just because they aren't APP customers anymore.
So there was a slide that summarized the components of a municipal implementation plan. Is there guidance available from NYSERDA or DPS on that and how it could be written?
I can answer that, Brad.
Okay.
We could, well, you'll have the guidance because this webinar is being recorded. So you'll have the bulleted the details of that, but you'll see it in the straw proposal that's filed in March 22nd. You'll see the components of it then.
Okay, great. So regarding the minimum savings for APP customers that it's recommended, I'm wondering if this is a dollar savings from the CCA supply cost or from what the customer had been paying to the utility for supply before enrollment in a CCA. Maybe I'll give that one to Kelly or Tom.
This is Tom. I think it's going to depend whether, what mechanism we use to provide the discounts, whether it's a dollar amount through like the pooling arrangement or based off, just a flat number for the year. Generally, as folks know, CDG, the savings, the percentage savings from CDG are tied to the cost, I should say the value of the credits, not necessarily a savings on the customer's total bill. Again, I think the answer to this is really going to depend on which mechanism we ultimately go with. But this is a fair question and something we need to make sure we're clear on once we do choose an option.
So thanks, Tom. So the next question is, and I think this is a good one. Can you briefly explain how the credit pooling mechanism would work? And would the CDG developer have a contract with the CCA, the EDC, which I'm not familiar with that acronym, and or an individual customer? Maybe I'll send that to Max to answer.
Sure, and I also am not a utility electric distribution company. Oh, I think we have someone from another jurisdiction on the line. No, we are not familiar with that acronym. So uh, the you know, the credit pooling mechanism, and I know this is you know, likely a new concept for some folks on the call. It was proposed, as I mentioned before, in the expanded solar for all proposal, and adopted by the commission order. You know, in concept, it's meant to, in the case of an opt-out program, get away from the need to always have an individual customer tied to an individual project. In the case of, you know, as we designed it, expand solar for all, but you know, we're analogizing this here to opt-out CCAs. You have you know, a pool of customers in the CCA, and you have a pool of projects that have been procured for the CCA. By treating that as a you know, a large pool of demand and a single large pool of supply, and just making sure those two balance out. In the case of the expanded solar for all mechanism, those are meant to balance on an annual basis with a mechanism for a sort of a true up and rollover. That, you know, in concept eliminates a lot of the administrative cost and effort really on everyone's part, and seems appropriate given the design of the programs. You know, again, we want to acknowledge that this sort of system would likely take some amount of time for the utilities to set up if it were ordered into place. So that, you know, needs to be explored. In terms of who has a contract with whom, I'm just looking at the way this question was. Trying to get back to this question here. Apologies. Well, I think the you know, the concept is that the developer would have a contract, I believe, with the CCA administrator, and please, Kelly or Brad, correct me if I'm misstating any part of this. But there would be, as we proposed for ESFA, a parallel utility credit managing system for opt-out CCAs, credit pooled projects, and that, you know, that may require adjustments to tariffs. So, you know, again, the goal is to just really minimize that administrative friction as, you know, residents move out, you know, usage changes and so on, attempting to balance the sort of supply and demand across between individual projects and customers would seem to be, you know, very, very challenging and resource intensive, and we're trying to look at alternatives.
Thanks, Max. And this is Kelly. Who the CDG developer would have the contract with, that's going to be consistent with how CCA supply works. So the developer would have the contract with the municipality.
Thank you, Kelly. I apologize for misstating that.
Okay, so another question for Kelly is the energy supply a required component of the CCA as it relates to the CDG opt-out?
Not necessarily. As we proposed today, the CDG can be offered as a standalone product. So it could be just CDG or combined with a supply. it's up to the it's up to the municipality on what they choose.
Great. I'm going to tee this one up for Michael. So working with opt-in and the two new opt-out CDG programs, one of the biggest concerns right now seems to be the utility's ability to process solar credits effectively. Do we know how long it will take utilities to update their IT systems? I know some are much better than others. Michael?
Sure. So the commission has already adopted a net crediting model and work has begun on implementing this. Obviously, each utility has different implementation timelines due to varying systems and varying system upgrades conducted by each utility. But we do plan to work closely with the utilities to understand where they're at, and hopefully we'll have an update for everyone at our next webinar.
So because of the way the credit pool is structured, is there any reason why a customer couldn't participate in CCA opt-out and CDG? Technically, they wouldn't be subscribed to a specific CDG project and wouldn't be receiving credits. Kelly, do you have an answer for that?
So if I understand this question correctly, they would be participating in the community's opt-out program, and this participant is curious whether or not they could also be opt-in, just receiving credits through two separate mechanisms: the conventional net crediting and the pooled. Am I understanding this one correctly?
I think that's correct, Kelly.
Okay. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, if we follow the current CDG requirements, customers, you can't be a member for two separate CDG projects. So I would think we would want to follow that and adopt those rules similar to that.
And this is Max. I'll add that, you know, this is one of the challenges with the option that I described for expanded solar for all for the same reasons. I saw a question come through whether that was that option was included in the proposal that National Grid and NYSERDA filed last year, and the answer is no, it wasn't. It is a new idea, and it you know, has that, again, that major challenge of not necessarily being consistent with the way CDG credits and participation in multiple projects have been handled in the past. And, you know, judging by the questions, some related questions, you know, it's a fair it's a fair question to ask. You know, if layering can exist with one set of programs, why not other combinations of programs, which such as opt-in CCA and opt-out CCA, which I believe was the crux of the last question that was discussed.
Yeah, so this is a very similar question, which was, you mentioned the possibility of layering the expanded solar for all benefit on top of a possible CCA. Would it similarly be possible to have a customer enrolled in classic opt-in project and also be enrolled in either both a CCA and expanded solar for all? So it sounds like, Max, you already answered that question.
Yeah, I think this one was already answered. Just to echo the response, we want to make sure that we get CDG to as many New Yorkers as possible. So to be in line with the CDG rules, I think the answer would be no. If the customer was already in a CDG project, that membership should be available for someone who's not in a CDG project.
Great. So we have a comment. The recommendation is that it may be helpful for CCA administrators. One recommendation that may be helpful for CCA administrators would be some sort of mechanism put in place to help CDG participants identify their solar credit allocation, or a mechanism to track their solar savings. Current CDG customers in our Rochester Gas and Electric territory have credits banked in their utility accounts that are not visible to the customer, which makes it difficult for participants to identify what they've actually received in terms of credits or savings. So thank you for that comment. Okay. So a recent DPS white paper relevant to the LIPA service area made several very strong and positive recommendations to the utility regarding CCA. However, no timetable was established for the implementation of those recommendations. Will the CDG white paper recommend timelines for the implementation of any changes that may be required of the utility? I'll pass that one to Tom Dwyer.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. So I believe this question is referring to the Long Island Choice White Paper that was filed earlier this year. With respect to the straw proposal that we're developing for opt-out CDG, there may be specific requirements proposed as far as what the utilities might need to do to update billing systems or things like that. I don't know if the white paper or the straw proposal itself will propose timelines. Ultimately, those are usually imposed by the commission when they adopt a recommendation. And if additional work needs to be done, they'll direct that be done within a certain time frame. So as far as, kind of set in stone implementation dates, I would expect that would be something provided in a subsequent commission order.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So regarding administrative fees, what does, quote, competitive municipal bid process with NYSERDA's assistance mean? How does that work for a nonprofit like Sustainable Westchester? Max?
So I may need to lean on Kelly or Tom or Matt here, in that I believe the recommendation was meant to be similar to the process for supply procurement, where there's well, I'm not sure if this is or for current CC administrator procurement, where municipalities are given some assistance from the NYSERDA toolkit on selecting an administrator, such as some templated language. Brad, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
Well, just, yeah, I mean, the statement in the slide does seem to imply that there's some kind of like role for NYSERDA. I think it is a straight competitive municipal bid, or rather, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but in a conventional supply scenario, the administrator, CCA administrator, is issuing the solicitation for the supply. If it was consistent for opt-out CDG, then the administrator would also issue a a competitive bid, separate from the municipality. So I could see why that statement could be a source of confusion. Would be something that we would want to look at and clarify, who would be undertaking the bid process. And maybe that's a good question for Kelly. Is that is that typically what we would expect the CCA administrator to be soliciting for to procure these credits from CDG developers on behalf of the municipality?
Yeah, that's how it's being done with the supply product. So yes, I think this recommendation was just that NYSERDA could be available or create a tool that could be, or a document, I should say, to be included in the toolkit to help aid the municipalities in their solicitation for CDG.
And even if the administrator was preparing and submitting the solicitation on behalf of the municipality, I mean, I just want to make clear for the audience that there's not a shift here that would put the onus on procuring CDG from the CCA administrator onto the municipality, because the municipality may not be prepared to issue such a solicitation.
That's correct, Brad.
Okay, good. All right. So in order for an ESCO to participate in an opt-out CDG combined with supply, would the ESCO need to be approved to serve APP customers?
I can take that one, Brad. This is Tom Dwyer again. It's a good question. Really, the CDG component isn't as relevant to that determination, and it's really the supply part. As folks know, low-income customers served on a CCA supply are required to be served with a guaranteed savings product. That said, those ESCOs that are serving those CCAs do not register or get a waiver from the commission to serve low-income customers generally, like a number of ESCOs do. I don't think adding CDG kind of changes that that analysis. This is certainly something we want to make sure we give full thought to, but I believe that the rules wouldn't change in that respect, adding CDG, that customers served by a CCA and low-income customers served by a CCA would be able to do so long as they provided that customer with a guarantee of savings on the supply side.
Okay, there's another question I think I misheard, but is it possible to enroll in both Expanded Solar for All and CCA opt-out to layer these two programs? We've kind of answered that already, but maybe Kelly, you can just reiterate.
Sure, Brad. Yeah, I think that's the third option that Max went over in the Expanded Solar for All slide, right? Whether or not it could be done. And we need to first see if it's even feasible with the regulations in place and come up with if it is, then we will come up with a recommendation to allow for that. But if we can't do that, and we just can't do that. Well, so we have to do a little more thinking on that and research.
Great, thanks, Kelly. So I'm going to tee this one up for Tom. Would you recommend a community solar provider in the subscriber acquisition services with capacity look into becoming a CCA administrator, or work or partner with one or more of the existing 4 CCA administrators?
Thanks, Brad. That's an interesting question. I don't think we would recommend, issue a recommendation one way or the other. I think that's, kind of a business decision that the community solar provider would have to make, whether it makes sense, again, for them to become their own administrator or to work with one of the existing. Don't have a real recommendation as to what would be best for an individual provider.
Well, can I just follow that up by asking, is the relationship between, I mean, when I read here, it says community solar provider. That sounds like a developer to me, even though it says it's in the subscriber acquisition services. I'm a little confused as to the role, but I'm curious about, conflicts of interest between owners of CDG projects and if they can own projects and still be a CCA administrator. Also, this notion of a partnership with one or more existing administrators, that almost suggests that, instead of a competitive bidding process, that they would be as a function of this partnership, given the business. And I guess maybe even if this question wasn't from a developer, is it appropriate to just speak to conflicts of interest between these different types of entities?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'll have to give some more thought to before I kind of respond live on this call. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts here today.
Yeah, if anybody has feedback on that question, I mean, I think it would certainly be welcome for to help inform the straw proposal. Um, all right, so how does an administrative fee work in the competitive bid process when the asset owner is the admin of opt-out CDG as well? Is that not a conflict of interest between shareholders of the CDG asset owner, admin, and the municipality? I think that's something that will need to be looked at.
Yeah, just similar to the prior comment, I think, we're certainly going to look at that. And, the issues with conflicts of interest are certainly of concern and noteworthy. And this is helpful information to know, but I just want to reiterate, we're open to hearing about these potential concerns if there's specific examples or things like that that could kind of help flesh out the thinking on how to address some of these potential conflicts.
Yeah, and that's a good summary to another question, which was could we repeat the question that we'd like feedback on? And that's really it. It relates to potential conflicts of interest, between administrators and those who would be bidding on the project, bidding on the solicitations to provide the credits, through the opt-out CDG program, and what those rules and relationships should be. Another question. So this is a technical one. Developers with projects that do not have the VETR community credit in Con Edison will only pursue CDG if the customer acquisition is covered by the adders, whether opt-in or opt-out. Any project without community credit will not likely be viable as CDG under the proposed community adder incentive. How do today's recommendations address this impact of 10 gigawatt roadmap on top of changes to opt-out CDG? I think this is a Max question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a bit more of a question, a comment than a question. And, as noted in the question, that is a topic covered in the 10 gigawatt roadmap. So certainly that comment period is open until I believe March 7th. So certainly, stakeholders that would propose a different balance between the community adder as proposed by NYSERDA and DPS in the 10 gigawatt roadmap between the community adder and the base New York Sun incentive should certainly address those address that issue in the comments on the roadmap. I'm not sure whether there's any I guess there is the specific element related to opt-out CDG in terms of like specific costs with opt-out CDG and what a community adder should be there. So as I think I described before, those comments are also encouraged on the 10 gigawatt roadmap and were explicitly asked for in the filing.
So on this conflict of interest that we've asked, just to reflect on the specific examples of conflict of interest are already parked on the PSC docket for opt-out only CDG. So that is a comment. And also another comment, we have made the recommendation on the white paper that CDG developers, providers not be allowed to administer opt-out CDG programs due to conflicts of interest. We uphold that only state authorized CCA administrators should be able to do opt-out CDG as an unbiased party. Thank you for your comment. Okay, so I'm not sure who we're going to send this to, but similar to the minimum 1,000 kilowatt hour allocation being waived, will the maximum of allocation rule of 100% of the historical 12-month follow? This is important if a minimum dollar savings is the goal, and how that relates to the net crediting discount percentage the project can be compensated at. Low usage customers may have to be allocated at multiples to their historical kWh usage. Anyone want to take that? All right, we might need to noodle on that one a little bit. I think it's essentially a comment for us to put a little focus on that. Certainly, we'll have to think about the maximum of the allocation. Although we'll have to understand maybe even more clearly, what is meant by that question. Is there a maximum of allocation rule that says it needs to supply 100% of the historical 12 months usage of the customer max?
Yeah, the rule is that is the maximum allocation, I believe. So I think that probably also goes in the category of items that I believe Kelly and Tom spoke to earlier, such as the 1,000 K. I mean, I'm now finding the question in the list, so it is similar to the 1,000 kWh minimum potential rule change to be considered. But it's a good specific point that our analysis on expanded solar for all certainly validated that to hit say a $60 a year required minimum savings, you do for low usage customers need to subscribe. Well, you either need to subscribe more capacity, or you need to provide deeper percentage savings. So how you kind of balance those things out. Again, it's something we answered with the credit pooling mechanism. So that may be more complicated in a net crediting situation. Especially given that net crediting rules only allow one level of discount percentage.
Great, thanks. So we're hearing from many developers that they are considering a heavy shift to remote crediting with the loss of the community credit and lack of performance-based funding from the 10 gigawatt roadmap. This would limit availability of CDG. Have you considered how this would be a self-limiting factor for capacity? Max, could I have you try to swing at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, this is since it speaks to the potential future incentive levels, really a good thing to address in comments on the 10 gigawatt roadmap. Again, the roadmap kind of put out a proposal for setting new community adder, new base incentives, and also asked the question about what the community adder should be for potential opt-out programs. So I, definitely great to submit informal comments in this process, but also, again, I just encourage everyone to get any thoughts on the program proposed in the 10 gigawatt roadmap in under that docket.
Okay, and I believe this was just covered, but I hear two opposing statements today that cannot both be true. One is that the customer acquisition administrative fees for opt-out CDG are lower. Therefore, we can lower the community adder for opt-out CDG. And then two, the education and outreach and other requirements such as the Muni implementation plan requirement mentioned today keep escalating for opt-out versus opt-in. If E&O and other, I guess, education and outreach and other program costs are higher for opt-out CDG than for opt-in, why lower the community adder for opt-out CDG?
Well, I can take a shot at that again. Lowering the community adder for opt-out CDG has not been proposed. That was asked as an open question in the 10 gigawatt roadmap, and this is exactly the sort of feedback we're hoping to get. But I also I don't think it was stated on this webinar that any current NYSERDA or DPS analysis suggests that the total call them soft costs associated with CDG, customer acquisition, education, management, would be anticipated to be higher for opt-out versus opt-in. I mean, I think quite the opposite. Even in the some of the information we do have about at least intended costs or expected costs for some of the opt-out CCAs that were previously proposed, that those numbers were lower than I think assumptions for opt-in CDG, and I believe all of our analysis would be that ultimately once the program was fully stood up, opt-out CACA costs would be lower. That of course it would be one of the major goals of such a program. I see the question was asked in the context of Con Ed. There I think that's especially important because given that there is more potential customer demand than CDG availability, if costs aren't lower for opt-out CCAs, I think it's a fair question to ask. What the value of the policy would then be if there aren't sufficient opt-in CDG customers for all the capacity that's being developed, if the costs are indeed the same.
Okay, another one for you, Max. Is there a specific memo that summarizes the credit pooling mechanism specifically, or is that simply included in the expanded Solar for All framework?
It's the latter. So the most complete write-up would be In the expanded solar for all proposal, there's a, I think there's an appendix. I believe the title of the appendix is functional details, and that really spells out how that mechanism could work. Functional overview. Just refer to my document.
Functional overview. Okay. So we did offer the opportunity for anyone to raise their hand to provide comments. We don't have anybody raising their hand at this time, and it appears that we might have answered all the questions in the Q&A feature. So unless there are any final questions, we are going to wrap this up. But as we do that, let me just take a second to thank our events team at NYSERDA for helping with this webinar today. We really appreciate all the help, Karen and Sal, in putting this together. This doesn't happen just by itself, so we really thank and appreciate you for all the assistance. And you see here presented our contact information. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any follow-up, but you saw the cca@dps.ny.gov email address that you could submit comments to. We really appreciate all of the participation here. The question is being recorded and will slides be shared? The answer is yes. We are going to turn around and put this onto YouTube, and we'll have links that will be in the case file for this proceeding, and it'll either be in the NYSERDA or the DPS YouTube channel if you want to keep an eye out for that. But we should be doing that in relatively short period of time. So with that being said, I think we will take this opportunity to conclude the webinar. Again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate it. Great job, everyone, and we will sign off. Okay, goodbye, everyone. Take care.